It's almost midnight, and you're still staring at the ceiling. Not because you're tired, you are tired, but your brain has other plans tonight. It keeps circling back to that one comment your coworker made in the meeting. Maybe it wasn't even that bad, but you've replayed it about 14 times now, and somehow it gets a little sharper every time. I want to say something kind of blunt right off the bat. You're not broken for doing this. You're just untrained. Nobody ever sat you down and actually taught you what to do with a moment like that. So your mind does the only two things it knows how to do. It either throws the hurt outward onto everybody around you, or it swallows it whole and lets it sit in your gut like a stone you keep carrying around for no reason. Let me give you a quick picture of what I mean, because it's easier to see it than to hear it explained. Say you got passed over for a promotion. Somebody with less experience than you got the job, and now you're sitting there scrolling through their new job title on LinkedIn at 11 at night, feeling something ugly bubble up in your chest. Some people go loud with that. They complain to every coworker who listen. They write the long venting text to a friend. They need somebody, anybody, to agree the world screwed them over. Other people go the opposite way. Quiet. They just absorb it. Smile through the next team meeting like nothing happened, and let the resentment sit there, low and constant for weeks. Neither one of those actually moves you forward. You already know that. I already know that. Everybody kind of knows that deep down. Here's a question worth asking, though. What if there was a third option? Not venting, not bottling it up, something else entirely. Something a Roman emperor figured out almost 2,000 years ago, scribbling in a journal he never expected anyone else to read. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and that journal eventually got a title, Meditations, though he never called it that himself. It was just notes to himself, arguments he was having with his own mind at 2 in the morning, probably not that different from the ones you're having right now. He was borrowing from thinkers before him, too. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before he ever taught a single lesson, and Zeno, who apparently started the whole thing standing under a painted porch in Athens, just talking, and somehow it turned into a school of thought that outlived every empire that tried to compete with it. They called it Stoicism. And no, before you picture some guy suppressing every feeling he's ever had, walking around like a block of granite, that's not it. That's actually the opposite of what this is. Real Stoicism is closer to this: learning where your power actually starts and where it actually ends. That's it. That's the whole engine underneath everything else. Let's go back to Epictetus for a second, because this part matters. He drew a line, a real hard line down the middle of everything that happens to a person. On one side, things that are up to you, your choices, your effort, how you decide to respond. On the other side, everything else, the weather, traffic, what your coworker actually meant by that comment, whether the promotion goes to you or to somebody else who's been there 6 months less than you have. Now, here's where most people trip over this idea, myself included for a long time, honestly. People hear "let go of what you can't control" and they think it means stop caring, stop trying, just shrug and coast. That's not what it means at all. It means stop spending your energy on the part that was never yours to begin with, and start spending it on the part that is. Think about the last job you applied for and didn't get. You can't control the hiring manager's mood that day, or the fact that some other candidate happened to know somebody on the inside. What you can control is how well you prepared, how honestly you showed up, whether you followed up like a professional instead of disappearing into resentment. Two people can do the exact same amount of effort and get completely different outcomes. That's not injustice. That's just how the math of reality works sometimes, and it's a hard pill. I think about the nights I used to lay awake running through conversations that hadn't even happened yet, rehearsing arguments with people who didn't even know we were fighting. All that mental energy, and none of it was aimed at anything I could actually touch or change. The Stoics would look at that and just ask one simple thing. What's actually in front of you right now? Not 5 steps ahead, right now. And then do that one thing and let the rest go. Not because it doesn't matter, but because you were never holding it in the first place. There's a version of this idea in Seneca too, a Roman statesman who wrote a whole bunch of letters to a friend of his named Lucilius, basically mentoring him through actual letters. Kind of wild when you think about it. Philosophy delivered by mail. Seneca had this line about how we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And if you've ever spent an entire Sunday dreading a Monday conversation that ended up taking 4 minutes and going totally fine, you already know exactly what he meant. Most of the pain isn't even in the event. It's in the rehearsal beforehand. Okay, second idea, and this one's a little harder to swallow. Marcus wrote a line in that private journal of his that basically flips the whole obstacle thing on its head. Something like, what stands in your way becomes the way forward. Read that twice if you need to. I did. We're wired, biologically and culturally, to treat every obstacle like a stop sign. Something goes sideways and our brain immediately files it under problem, avoid this. But the Stoics are making a different claim entirely. The obstacle isn't a detour from your story. It is your story. There's this guy, a woodworker I read about once, who lost the use of 2 fingers in a shop accident. Most people would have quit the trade right there. He didn't. He spent the next year designing his own tools around what his hands could actually do now, and ended up building furniture that people specifically sought him out for because of how he'd adapted. The accident didn't end the craft. It became the craft. Every person you've ever actually admired, and I mean really admired, not just liked, their story was never about how smooth things went for them. It was about what happened the moment things stopped being smooth. That's the actual footage worth watching, not the highlight reel before the fall, the part right after it. So maybe try this next time something goes wrong. And something will, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Swap the question. Instead of, why is this happening to me? Try, what's this actually preparing me for? Small shift. Changes more than you'd expect. I'll be honest, this one took me way longer to actually believe than to just say out loud. It's easy to nod along to the obstacle is the way while you're watching a video about it. It's a whole different thing when you're standing in the middle of your own obstacle, and it's ugly, and it doesn't feel like a path, it feels like a wall that showed up specifically to ruin your week. I remember a stretch a couple years back where basically everything stalled at once. Work, money, a relationship that was quietly falling apart in the background. And none of it felt like growth in the moment. It felt like drowning. It was only looking backwards, months later, that I could actually see what got built during that stretch. Patience I didn't have before, a thicker skin, the ability to sit with discomfort without immediately needing to fix it or run from it. None of that shows up while you're in it. It only shows up in the rearview mirror. That's kind of annoying, honestly, but it's also just how it works. Third thing, and honestly this one might be the quietest but most important. You are not your emotions. You're the one standing behind them, watching them happen. The Stoics separated 2 things that most of us blur together without even noticing. The impression, meaning the raw hit of a feeling, your chest tightening, your face going hot, that jolt when someone cuts you off in traffic or says something that stings. That part's automatic. That part's just being human, and no philosophy's going to undo that. But then there's the judgment, what you decide that feeling means and what you do next. And between those 2 things, there's a gap. Sometimes it's a full second, sometimes it's barely anything, but it's there. Viktor Frankl, who lived through the concentration camps and later became one of the most important psychologists of the last century, said something almost identical to this, decades later and from a completely different direction. Between what happens to you and how you respond, there's a space, and in that space is basically your whole freedom as a human being. He never called himself a Stoic. Doesn't matter. Marcus would have recognized him in a heartbeat. Most of us never even notice that gap exists because nobody ever pointed it out to us. So we react. We snap at somebody who didn't deserve it. We send the text we shouldn't have sent. We make the call from the worst version of ourselves because we didn't slow down long enough to let the better version show up. And look, the fix here isn't stuffing it down either. It's just watching it, noticing it, asking yourself one honest question in that gap. Is this reaction actually who I'm trying to be right now? Picture this. You're driving, minding your business, and somebody cuts you off so close you have to hit the brakes. Heart jumps, face gets hot. That's the impression, and it happens whether you're a Stoic philosopher or anybody else on the planet. No amount of wisdom stops that jolt. But then comes the fork. You can lay on the horn, tailgate them for the next 2 miles, let it wreck the next 20 minutes of your day. Or you can notice the jolt, let it pass through you like weather, and just keep driving. Same event, 2 completely different next 20 minutes, depending entirely on what happens in that little gap. It sounds small when I say it like that. It's not small. It's basically the whole game. Control what's yours. Let go of what was never yours to begin with. Treat the wall in front of you as part of the road, not a detour off it, and find that little gap between what happens and how you answer it. Because that gap is where you actually live. None of this is easy, and I'd be lying if I said the Stoics themselves nailed it every day. Marcus ran an empire and still made a mess of things plenty of times. Epictetus had every excuse in the world to be bitter and chose something else instead. They were regular people wrestling with the same static in their heads that you're wrestling with tonight. That's kind of the whole point, actually. This was never a philosophy for people who already had it figured out. It's for the rest of us, if you want a small place to actually start. Forget trying to apply all 3 of these at once. That's a fast road to giving up on the whole thing after 3 days. Just pick one. Tomorrow, when something annoying happens, and it will, something always does, just pause for 1 breath before you react. That's it, 1 breath. Ask yourself which part of this is actually up to you. Do that and let the rest go. It won't feel like much the first time. It rarely does. But do it enough times and you start to notice the gap Frankl was talking about actually widening a little. You start catching yourself before the snap instead of after it. If any of this landed with you tonight, stick around. This channel's called Mindset Archives, and it's built on ideas exactly like these ones. And if you want more of them showing up in your feed, go ahead and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you'd think.